أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The third session within the series of Tazkiyah pearls. Today I'm going to talk about one of the 4 rules that I shared with you yesterday. The 4 rules of Tazkiyah. Number 1, it applies to you and only you. Everything that you learn to apply to yourself, and you're not interested in projecting it on other people. The second rule is that there'll be exercises, and you must try those exercises in controlled environments to learn things about yourself that otherwise you wouldn't be able to learn. It's best to learn these things before life actually sends you a scenario that is real and you may not have the time or the bandwidth to learn the lesson because you're stuck with the reality itself. So exercises are helpful with that. Number 3, you must have a wird and a hizb on a daily basis, and you have to grow it slowly as you go along. And then number 4 is reflection or contemplation, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I assumed when I started teaching this topic a couple of years ago that this was something that people did naturally, that this concept was something that everyone understood and practiced. And it was only maybe a year and a half in or 2 years in that I figured out that most people actually don't practice this at all. And it's a foreign concept to them. So I had to take some time and talk about what it means. In the Quran uses the term tafakkur, right? But it uses other terms as well. And he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعِظُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ مَثْنَى وَفُرَادَى ثُمَّ تَتَفَكَّرُوا. Indeed, I ask you of one thing and one thing only, which is for you to advocate for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in groups and alone, and then to engage in deep thought. تَتَفَكَّرُوا. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Those who invocate and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their different situations, whether they're standing up or sitting down or lying down, however they may be, and they engage in deep thought, reflect and contemplate in the creation of the cosmos and the earth. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. A blessed book that we have revealed to you, so that they may contemplate its words, its verses, and they may be mindful or remember or engage in remembrance, those who have intellect. So he uses the word tadabbur as well, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and sometimes tadhakkur as well. And scholars in their books will use different terms. They will use yaqada and istibsar and tafakkur and tadabbur and other words as well, many other words that they use to describe this same action, which is to contemplate and to reflect. And the number of times that you find in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ أَوْ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, right? There's over 16 times in total with يَعْقِلُونَ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ, which is the same idea being repeated. Right? يقول أبو الدرداء رضي الله عنه فيما صح موقوفا عليه تفكر ساعة خير من قيام ليلة. Abu Darda, in a quote that is authentic in terms of what he said, and he said to perform tafakkur for an hour is better than praying all night, a qiyam of a full night. And he wouldn't be able to say that, radiallahu anhu, had he not learned something from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, because this is something you can't say unless someone taught you. هذا مما يعني هو وقفي. هذا وقف. You can't. This is not an issue of ijtihad. He must have heard this somewhere, or this is what the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam did. He did this in a way that made it seem to him that this was better. عمر ibn Qais الملائي رضي الله عنه رحمه الله, one of the tabi'een, قال بلغني أو بلغنا أن تفكر ساعة خير من عمل دهر من الدهر. So it has been taught to us, and he's one of the tabi'een, that performing contemplation for an hour is better than working or a deed for dahr min ad-dahr, meaning they can go for days and days or for a long period of time. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, he quotes a number of the tabi'in. قال الفضيل, this is what he said, قال الفضيل بن عياض التفكر مرآتك تريك حسناتك من سيئاتك. Contemplation is your mirror. It shows you the good in you and it shows you the bad in you. قال وكان سفيان بن عيينة يتمثل بقوله إذا المرء كانت له فكرة ففي كل شيء له عبرة. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, the great muhaddithin, one of the great tabi'in, he said the human being, if the person has a fikrah, has the capacity to contemplate and to reflect, then he will learn from everything. He will take a ibrah. He will learn something from everything that he or she witnesses within in their lives. قال وكان الحسن البصري يقول يشرح قوله سأصرف عن آياتي الذين يتكبرون في الأرض بغير الحق أي يصرفهم عن التفكر فيها. So when Sayyidina al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah used to explain this ayah in Surah Al-A'raf where Allah says سأصرف عن آياتي الذين يتكبرون, I'm going to send away from my verses or from my signs those who are arrogant. He says what he means by that is that he's going to distract them from contemplating them and thinking about them. And Sayyidina al-Hasan al-Basri used to say طول الفكرة طريق إلى الجنة. يعني long contemplation is a pathway that takes you to Jannah. وكان وهب ابن المنبه يقول, one of the great tabi'in as well, يقول ما من امرئ أطال الفكرة إلا علم وما علم إلا عمل بما علم. That no one will spend time in contemplation except they will learn things. And the person who learns things will act based on what they have learned. Right? وكان بشر الحافي يقول من تفكر في عظمة الله لم يعصه. قال لو تفكر الناس في عظمة الله لم يعصه. If the people thought about or contemplated the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the divine, then they would never sin. They would never. وكان ابن عباس رضي الله عنه يقول, Ibn Abbas has multiple quotes on this topic, and I'll choose one of them for you because it's powerful. قال ركعتان مختصدتان بتفكر خير من قيام ليلة بلا قلب. Say 2 rak'ahs that have some degree of contemplation in them is better than praying all night with your heart somewhere else. So all of this is just to establish for you that this concept of tafakkur, of contemplating and reflecting, is a part of our deen, and it's a part of our ibadah as well. It's in the Quran and it's recognized as one of the acts of worship that we perform in our lives. And the best way for me to bring this closer to you is to give you examples of the Prophet ﷺ's life. Because ﷺ did this all his life. All throughout his life. He did this before his prophecy ﷺ. This is one of the acts of worship that he did throughout his prophecy and before. So it's something that he did all throughout his life ﷺ to the day he met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the example for it that I think is most meaningful is the concept of Ghar Hira that we all know about. And if you go and to Mecca and you have the opportunity to go up there, you should. You should for sure do this, because if you understand from me the following, because you can contemplate this there, because and it's very meaningful when you do so. For 6 months, alayhi salatu wasalam, I need you to think about this in depth. For 6 months, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would go to this mountain, to a cave in a mountain. It'll take you over around 2 hours to get there. Like if you start walking from where you can walk, it's going to take you 2 hours. Now this is after they drop you off close to where the mountains begin, where the cars can't go anymore. So it takes an hour to get there if you're living where the Prophet ﷺ lived. So he would walk for 3 hours, right, to get to this mountain in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of mountains, a lot of caves, and he would choose this one ﷺ. He's looking for something. He's looking for a mountain that is high enough and open enough where he could sit and he would see the openness of the sky, the openness of the landscape, and he could see the Kaaba from where he was sitting, alayhi salatu wasalam. So he positioned himself where he could see all these things. And for 6 months, he would go for weeks at a time, until to the point where, say, Khadija radiallahu anha would go up and take food for him and spend a little bit of time with him, and then come back and he would stay there. And aside from the fact that I don't understand, he was 40 years old, alayhi salatu wasalam, at the time. He came to a point in his life where he was extremely unsatisfied with how people were living and where he was in his own life, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he had questions. He had deep existential questions that he did not have clear answers for. So he would go to Ghar Hira, and I want you to think, what was he going to do up there? Right? With absolutely nothing, with no phones and no Xboxes and no pads of paper and no books to read and no one to spend time with. What is he doing up there, alayhi salatu wasalam? What is it that you could possibly do that could be worth staying there for weeks at a time? I understand maybe you want to get away from your family, but that goes for maybe 3 hours. And then you're hungry and you're tired and you want to go back home again. Like this is the norm. If this is what was happening, then you would go and spend a day at most, and then you would come home after that because he was in a cave, alayhi salam. He wasn't going to a holiday inn. This was a cave. Go up there and just to see, just to contemplate where he was sitting, alayhi salatu wasalam. But he sat there for days and days. For 6 months he would do this, alayhi salatu wasalam. Some narrations say up to 2 years. Some narrators say that he did this for up to 6 months of intense contemplation in the Ghar Hira. But for 2 years he was doing this, alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahu a'lam, I don't know. And you're not supposed to do this. So no one is saying, I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, saying you should go find a cave somewhere and sit there and spend weeks thinking. But I want to point out to you, and it's there that Jibreel alayhi salam came to him. There has to be something for us to contemplate here and learn. That it was there that Jibreel alayhi salam was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to recite upon him, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. It was during the time that he would sit. What is he doing up there? He is engaging in deep thought. He's engaging in deep contemplation and reflection. He's staring at the open sky and the landscape of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's earth, and he's looking at the Kaaba and he's thinking about his life and what was his purpose and what was he there to do, and how are people living today, and are people living appropriately, and is it possible that these idols have any value at all? Is the status quo that exists in the world today something that he should be a part of? And why does he feel that it's all wrong? And why does he feel that there's something that's missing in his life? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He had questions. He had questions that he was looking for answers for, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he was granted those answers by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jibreel came and answered them. So that's why you don't have to contemplate these things anymore. You're not required to contemplate these questions because the Prophet ﷺ did it and he received the answer from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have the answer today. So you know what you're here to do, who you are and where you're going and what purpose of life, what purposefulness you carry within your life. And all those questions have been answered. However, he didn't stop doing this, alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? He didn't stop. All throughout his life, he would continue to perform tafakkur. And we know that because there's an act of worship within our deen that is specifically designed to serve this purpose. And it's called i'tikaf. It's called i'tikaf. And I know that we only seem to associate i'tikaf with Ramadan. However, i'tikaf is not something the Prophet ﷺ associated only with Ramadan. The Prophet ﷺ would perform i'tikaf all throughout the year. وكانت له قبة تضرب في المسجد وحصير يرفع على بيت سيدة عائشة يعتكف فيها عليه الصلاة والسلام الليالي الطوال. So the narrations is that the Prophet ﷺ had a barrier. So between his mihrab, his minbar and mihrab, and the door of his Sayyidah Aisha, there was a little bit of a space. The Prophet ﷺ would bring it was a piece of fabric that he would use to cover the area between the door of his Sayyidah Aisha and the mihrab, meaning he would open the house of the door of the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, and he would enter the masjid, and there would be a barrier between him and people, right? And he would use this for i'tikaf alayhi salatu wasalam. And i'tikaf, you should do it at some point. Our masjid is not we're not set up for it, unfortunately. Inshallah, maybe at some point in the future we'll set things up in a way that's possible, and we'll teach the culture of i'tikaf, because the culture of i'tikaf that exists today is not good anyways. Like, I wouldn't want people to perform i'tikaf anyways, because I've watched people perform i'tikaf, and it has nothing to do with i'tikaf. This is just, you don't want to sleep at home and you want to sleep outside. You're just bringing your blanket and your pillows and your phone with you to the masjid, and instead of doing what you were doing to do at home, you come and do it in the masjid with your friends. So it's nice. It's a nice sleepover, but that's not what i'tikaf is. I told them for the sleepover, but it's not i'tikaf. I'tikaf, it means in Arabic, akafa ala shay, is when you focus fully on something, when you devote yourself to something. That's what i'tikaf means. When you're in the mode of full dedication for one thing. So when the Prophet ﷺ performed i'tikaf, meaning he was focused on one thing. He wanted to give himself time where he was not allowed to be, where people were not allowed to distract him. So they wouldn't speak to him ﷺ when he was in his i'tikaf. They would try to listen. They would eavesdrop. For sure, they would eavesdrop and try to hear what he was saying, ﷺ, what he was doing. But when you perform i'tikaf, you can only pray for so long, and read Quran for so long, and do dhikr for so long. But after that, there's always a certain portion of the time that is invested in just deep thought, in reflection, and in contemplation. And he would do this, ﷺ, for hours upon hours upon hours. It hurts me when we believe that this activity is somehow imported from a different culture. when we want to go to yogis or the people who understand meditation or Stoics, and we want to listen to them and what they have to say about this. When our Prophet ﷺ became a prophet ﷺ through tafakkur and continued to practice this all throughout his life ﷺ, and is one of the main Quranic concepts, which is reflection and contemplation. We have just left this act of worship. We stopped doing it. And this is what I believe. I believe that human beings, because when I talked about this to the students that I was teaching, I thought it was a given that this was something everybody did. Because it was something that everybody did prior to this era that we're living in. Prior to the little black box that you carry in your pocket that has absolutely engulfed your life and swallowed your time. Before that, when you didn't have that, right, all the other distractions were forgive me for the lack of, were pretty boring. Like after maybe half an hour of engaging in it, you got bored of them, you threw them out. So you were forced to daydream a bit. You were forced to stare out the window and look at the clouds, or pick up a stick and dig a hole. Just do something that is absolutely mindless at the time, allowing for your brain, allowing for your aql and for your qalb to perform the activity that they perform together. They perform this together. Yesterday I talked to you about certain nomenclature. And I told you the aql is the intellect that is capable of processing the information. The fu'ad is just the receiver. The consciousness, the awareness is just receiving all of the sensory stimuli. But it's the aql that's taking all of this and putting together. And the qalb is taking the zubda, as they say, the butter of it all. The qalb is just receiving what comes of these long hours of contemplation. But the aql and the qalb, they come together in contemplation, when you think deeply about things. And you do this in your life anyways. When you're in deep trouble, when you have a problem with you in your life, you do it. You just don't do it in a formal manner. You do it on the go, when you're driving your car, which is why you almost have accidents when you're really, really under stress. Because for a moment there, you're in such deep thought that your reflexes are dulled a little bit. Your reflexes are dulled, so you almost get into an accident, or you're sitting there and you miss the cue on something, or someone calls you, or someone shouts out your name, you don't hear them, because you're focused on something. And we do it at the wrong times. We do it when we're at work, or we're doing it when we're sitting at the table with our families and we're supposed to be talking to them. When really, as a Muslim, you're supposed to have dedicated time for this. There's supposed to be dedicated hours within your day where you actually remove everything and you sit there and you contemplate and you reflect. Tazkiyah doesn't work any other way. There's no point of you listening to anything I have to tell you if this is not a practice that you're going to take within your life, where you sit and you contemplate, you give it time, and you allow yourself to engage in deep thought on an idea, on a concept. It is a skill set. I have found out that most people don't know how to do this, and because they don't know how to do this, they can't really reflect on things appropriately. They can't contemplate. They have not figured out how their brain works, and they don't know how to contemplate appropriately. The example that I offer here, contemplation is it's like you have a big ball of yarn, and it's very entangled and intertwined. And in order for you to find some inner peace, in order for you to have clarity in your life, and clarity is the word that I'm looking for here, in order for you to have hudur ma'Allah, khushu' ma'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least you have to have clarity of thoughts. You have to be able to, it can't be a highway up here where cars are just going back and forth, and you need to have some degree of rhythm and stability. And this ball of yarn is filled with ideas that you have not dealt with. And sometimes you have to take one piece of yarn and tug on it very, very slowly for a while until it comes out, and then you put it aside, and then you tug on another one. And sometimes you tug on one, it won't come out because it's entangled with another one. So you have to try and tug on another one. This will take a while. This will take time. This will take time. Sometimes there's a thought that keeps on coming. You know why that thought keeps on coming? Because you haven't dealt with it yet. Because you have not achieved closure for it yet. When you start contemplating, you're going to find it hard. If you haven't done this before, you're going to find it a little bit difficult. You know why? Because the processor inside, once you start contemplating, are like, alhamdulillah ala salama. Thank you for finally taking care of it. And they have a million musibah that are waiting for you. There's a million musibah waiting, and they're like, all right, start with this one. And you're like, no, the sheikh said I should contemplate this topic. Sometimes if you haven't contemplated before, you don't get to choose the topic. Your brain has stuff ready. We have to figure this out. Sit down and figure this out so that we can move on with our lives. So you have to figure that one out. And then when you're done with that, your brain will throw another, the mental tics that occur, meaning the same idea repeating itself. All it is All it is your brain is saying, we have a lot of unfinished business. We need you to take this thought and end it. Think about it until you are comfortable with it. Another analogy that I offer you is the analogy of the caged birds. In your brain, it's like you have all these birds, and they're not caged. They're in the room, and they're just flying back and forth. They're your thoughts. Until you can catch them, capture them, and put them in a cage so that you can observe them, describe them, feel comfortable with them, they will continue to distract you for a long time. And sometimes you can't cage them all at once. You have to cage them you have to focus on one bird and catch it. It takes a while to catch a bird. Right? Find one, catch one, put it, and now focus on another one. Catch it, put it. If you start trying to catch them all, you catch none. If you try to just cast a net, you'll catch none of them, and you won't be able to actually learn anything of it. Performing contemplation and reflection is essential for anything within Tazkiyah to work. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to give you examples of this as we move along a little bit more. Because when we talk about values, for example, there's a session I'm going to talk to you about values. Values are created through this activity. When we talk about the qalb and what the qalb is able to produce for you in your life in terms of your emotions and your feelings and your subconsciousness, when it's good, then everything else is good. When your subconsciousness is stable and it's satisfied and it's happy, right? And it's close to Allah and joyful, then everything else will work in your life. These things aren't achieved through any other medium aside from reflection and contemplation, aside from sitting and thinking deeply about the topics that you are required to think about. There are different ways to do this. I'm going to give you some tips in terms of how you can do this in a way that's meaningful to you. One of them is the way, first of all, you have to set the scene. Right? You have to set the scene, meaning you have to be in the right, it has to be the right timing. So choose something that is either really early or something a time where you're not being, tugged on and nagged at. If you're going to try and contemplate after the moment you come home, this is not going to work. You have family and children and people who want to talk to you. It's not going to. If you try to contemplate during your job, it's not going to work either. You have to figure out a right time, a time where it's quiet enough for you to do it. Make wudu and then sit mustaqbil al-qibla and calm and bring your heart rate down. Bring your heart rate down, however that is. With breathing exercises, you can take a few deep breaths in and out until your heart rate slows down. Your brain can't slow down if your heart is going 120. Your brain can't focus on something if your heart rate is pumping too quickly. You have to bring your heart rate down and calm yourself down. And then when you calm yourself down, you have to be able to isolate a single thought, a single idea, whatever that idea is. And it doesn't matter what it is, by the way. It can be anything. It can be something of your present, something of your past, or something of your future. It doesn't really matter, but you have to have a single thought. What you're going to struggle with at the beginning is that when you try to isolate this thought, your brain is going to throw in other thoughts here and there. It's okay. Acknowledge the existence of other thoughts and set them aside. We will do this, give them a priority later. We'll talk about that. Write it down so that you can take time and think about this thought. If there's a nagging thought, meaning something that no matter what you do, you can't get rid of this one thought, then that's what you should start contemplating. And that's what your brain is telling you what to start with. That this is something that you are subconsciously bothered by. And it's causing you a lot of anxiety. And it's causing you a lot of difficulty. And it's causing you a lot of stress. So you start with that. If that's not the case, then just remove these thoughts and isolate a thought. Now when you isolate a thought, there's more than one way to go by how you contemplate or reflect it. There are two ways that I find helpful. I'm going to share them with you. There's a lot. This is obviously a very deep topic. There's a lot to share here with you. So I'm just going to share, but I'm just going to share with you two. The first one is the contemplation of the angles. Meaning it's like you take the thought and you put it in the middle of your brain space. And you just walk around looking at it from different angles. Just staring at it. Thinking about it from the different angles that it could be understood. The more you move around it, see, thoughts are abstract concepts. Abstract concepts, they need contemplation for them to be clearly understood. You can understand this. It's not an abstract concept. A Kleenex box is not. You can just look at it, stare at it. It's good. Khalas. Every time you see it, your brain will tell you what it is. But when you talk about something, for example, we're going to talk about humbleness in some depth. We're going to talk about tawaddu. We're going to talk about rahmah, compassion in some depth. We're going to talk about these. These are not, I can't buy a kilo of it for you and show it to you what it looks like. Here's humbleness. You see, this is what it looks like. It's something that's not abstract. Abstract concepts require you to contemplate them, to give them a 3D existence in your brain, and then look at them from different angles. Every angle you look at them from, they seem different. They function differently. But you have to learn and become comfortable with their visual within your head. Because everyone's going to see it a little bit differently. So the first method is the angles. Just thinking about, okay, what is the origin? Where did it come from? Why do I need this? How is this going to help me? How is it going to harm me if I don't? What is the benefit of this in general? Why did Allah command this or not? How is this supposed to be practiced? So these are the angles. Just asking questions about this one thought, one concept, and you're answering them. My advice to you is to journal some of your answers. I do this all the time. I used to do it on pieces of paper. I have like a stack of things at home. When I left Syria, I left my clothing, I left all the gifts, everything that has value. I brought those with me. I brought my books. My wife thought I was insane. She thought I was Majnoon. Majnoon, what are you doing? Like we had only 2 suitcases, and one of them was filled with just notebook upon notebook. I had one change of clothes. One. I left with what I was wearing and one change of clothes and the books. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I will leave. I shouldn't say this. I'm bringing these. These are coming with me. There's no way these are staying behind. All of this is coming with me. This is my life. This is everything I've ever thought of, and you need to go back to them. So you need to journal. You need to journal all of this stuff. My advice today: you have a phone, so you can just put it on your phone. You can just notes. Notes is a great tool to use. That's the first way. The second way to contemplate is running scenarios. And this is the easiest way. And most people do it that way, and it's very powerful. For example, a scenario is where you take a concept and you think, okay, let's say I behave this way, and then play it out in your mind. If you were to say this, then what would that person say? You would say that. And then I would say this. They would say that. And that would lead to, I don't like the outcome. I don't like the outcome of that one. So let's go back again. I won't say that, because if I say that, it's going to lead to a cascade that'll end up here, and I don't like where this is. So I'll try something else. I'm going to do this. So if I do this, what are they going to do? They're probably going to do this. And then you play it out, and I don't like that either. And you keep on doing that until you find a response. You're like, I like the outcome there. I like that outcome. And then you hold on to that one. And every time, and the more you do this, the more you will learn what the right behaviors are in certain, and this is also a way to contemplate any given ethic. It's the same thing. And what you'll always find is that being aggressive and being rude and being disrespectful and trying to dominate or establish authority or a superiority always ends up in a bad outcome. It makes you look bad. It makes you feel bad. It doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out. You think you do. You think that if I screamed louder or if I hit harder, then the outcome would be better. But if you actually play it out through your brain, you're like, I don't like this outcome. I don't like how the light I'm in with this. But you can't arrive at that if you don't play scenarios. So playing scenarios is a very powerful way where it's like you're running a short film in your brain. And actually your brain loves this. One of the most important concepts of contemplation, reflection, and tafakkur is that up here is chaos. Up here, it's absolute chaos. You have to be at peace with the chaos. You have to be okay with that. Your brain does not go through things as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't. Your brain goes at things randomly. Its process is a process of chaotic randomness, where it just throws things here and there. What you're doing with contemplation is you're just taking a train and you're putting it on the tracks, and then let it go for a while. And if you contemplate appropriately every day, you'll be driving one day, and the thought will jump. A thought will just jump into your mind. Why? Because the train's on the track. You're going to arrive at answers. You're going to get there. It's not going to happen immediately. You're not going to sit down and contemplate something for 15 minutes and actually have closure with it. Sometimes it'll take you months. Sometimes, or else why did the Prophet ﷺ spend 6 months? Unless I think I'm much smarter. No, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He spent 6 months, and had Jibreel not come, he probably would have spent longer. And he spent the rest of his life performing i'tikaf. He would take time off. I don't think you realize what I'm saying. He would take time off of his life just to perform i'tikaf for a couple of days at a time. Just to sit there. Now, aside from his worship, just wanting to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wanted to contemplate things. There are problems that he needed to think deeply about in order for him to have answers for alayhi salatu wasalam. Until we start treating this concept that way, until tafakkur and tadabbur and ta'ammul and yaqadha and istibsar and istidhkar, all these words, until they have that degree of importance for us in our lives, we will continue to struggle with things. And I'm giving this topic its own session because of its importance. Nothing I will share with you here is going to be something that I can give. They're not pills. Here, take this, you'll be fine. I'm giving you an idea. I'm explaining to you how the idea works. Now you have to take that idea and you have to contemplate it for some time. You have to allow it to slowly sink in. You have to spend time reflecting upon it. And if you don't, and this is one of the reasons that there's this distance between us and that the shuyukh have been saying the same thing, ya akhi. I'm not saying anything new. The shuyukh have been saying the exact same thing for thousands of years, a thousand years. The same thing. Every shaykh, turn them on. They are saying the same thing. Ya ibadallah this, ya jama'at, ya kada, ya ikhwani kada, ya ikhwati kada, the same stuff. Why is it that people aren't changing? Because there's none of this happening. Because you're just taking it face value, walking with it. It's not going to change. You have to take it and you have to do tafakkur. As the tabi'een explained to us, as the Prophet ﷺ did, as the Quran beautifully made the point. I'll end with that. Subhanallah bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum.